Hey everyone, this is ZDTUTTA here, and today I'm going to break down how to pretty easily get the bass for a song, just like the framework. It's not going to be about adding effects through the mixer channel or anything like that. It's just basically how to get drums, bass line, and a working melody, and hopefully from there you guys can start to add your own flair to the song. So I called this one Dembo House, and you'll see why later. So let's get right into it. So here I'm just soloing out different tracks for you guys to hear the different instruments that will be in the song. So yeah, we've got a lot of different drums basically. This is the drum sequence broken out by each instrument. And I have the BPM up here. You can just like click and slide it up or down to change, but I have it set to 125 beats per minute. I usually work with house, so that's roughly 120 to 130, and I usually stick between 125 and 128 specifically. So once you have all the drums for your song, just get the last one. So yeah, that's just a very, very basic house drum pattern. Obviously, you can use different instruments and pick a different structure if you want, but I just think the basic, like boots and cats pattern, um, it sometimes if you change things, you can paint yourself into a corner that you don't necessarily want to paint yourself into. And on top of that, you can see how I'm pulling up the piano now. I like to put the piano kind of in the gaps of the drum beat, so the more you fill your drums out, the less room you have for your instruments later. So So here I'm just picking out the root notes, like the bottom note, and you might not even end up using this channel, but this is basically like here you can see how these are the drum notes, and because we're in the piano they're grayed out, and so this is like a ghost channel or like ghost notes. And so once you build up your chords, you can actually go in the pattern menu here and disable that channel, but then the notes will still show up in gray, and so it'll kind of give you like a guide for where you can put notes of your real instruments. And so here I'm just trying to basically get the kind of rhythm and very like loose um, tone of the song, and because I'm switching between D and C sharp, that's going to give it kind of a minor feel. And here I'm going on the downbeat, like right where the kick would be. And for these two, it's on the offbeat, so kind of where the clap would be. And you can see that it creates a little bit of tension as well. And the minor stuff, that's what I like to work in, is all about kind of creating tension. So here, I'm going up 3 semitones, or a half step. It's the same word, but basically it's just jumping up a key on the piano. So I've already picked notes that kind of give the song a minor feel, And so we're going to build some minor chords on top of these root notes. And so to build a minor chord, you would simply go up 3 semitones or 3 half steps from your root, and that will be the second note in your chord. And here you can really hear the tension. It almost sounds bad in my opinion, but when we add the third notes on top, it'll kind of level out a bit. So here you can just see that I counted out more steps, half steps, and basically to finish out the minor chord, you want to go 7 semitones above your root note. And so you saw me count up either 4 more from F or 7 more from D, and either way you end up at A. And so this is actually a minor chord. I don't know music theory that well or really that much, but I'm pretty sure this would be a D minor chord because you're going 3 semitones above D and then 4 semitones above F to reach A. And so now you'll hear as I build these that the sound kind of levels off, it gets a bit brighter. So yeah, that's the chords taken care of, and I mean it's very very basic, but you really usually I actually don't end up using this channel. It's just so that now I have a structure for where my notes can go in the piano roll when I start to add more instruments down here in the pattern menu. Here I'm just trying to get a bass line down. I'm going to use the piano notes as a guide for the bass line now. And here you can see that I actually have the bass on the offbeat for each note, whereas I'm not following the structure that I had for the ghost channel. And I don't know, usually in most kind of house and EDM songs it kind of has that pulsing sensation and that kind of like and so you get that from having a kick followed by a note on the offbeat. And so generally, not always, I like to structure my bass lines on the offbeat, and that's the same with like reggae. You'll hear that pattern a lot, and it kind of creates a bouncing effect from note to note, and that's just how I like to structure my songs, but obviously you can do it differently. And here you'll see me clicking these green dots. This is called the active/mute state of the track or the channel. And so you can actually kind of preview what your song would be like, and you can click in different channels, see how different channels sound together, because that's going to be super important. Like if you just mute out or solo the bass line and you think that it's sounding really good, but then you go back and play it with the rest of the song, it doesn't quite match. And so it's basically an issue of being coherent versus being cohesive, and you might be able to get a coherent bass line that sounds good on its own, but it's also got to be cohesive and it's got to work well with the rest of the song. And so there's changes that you can make, like you saw me drop the volume down on the bass so that it didn't stand out as much. So you're gonna have to, once you get it to be coherent, you're gonna have to make more changes to get it to be cohesive. And so these active and mute states basically let you preview and kind of hear how everything's going to work together before you actually jump into the song editor out of the pattern editor and really like commit to splitting this by channel and blah blah blah, stuff that we'll go over later. And there what you saw me do is if you solo out an instrument once, just that instrument will play, and then if you solo it out again, then the entire channel list will play all at once. And so it's a pretty good way of actually simulating the drop if you'd only have one instrument before the drop comes. And so you can kind of get a feel for how the drop is going to sound, and you can make changes before you split this and go into the song editor, like I was saying. So yeah, that is how to get a rough bass line. And I mean, you could even, like, for now I'm just leaving this as the melody, but it's not really even a melody, it's just some chords, so it's pretty weak. And I didn't record all of this just to keep the time down, but I'll see you guys in a sec, and I'll have a more finished version of the song with some melodies down here. Okay guys, so yeah, I'm sorry I didn't record all this, but it would have been boring anyway. I don't know music theory, like I said, so I really just have to kind of click and trial by error a lot of stuff. But you can see that I've added a second 4-bar measure, basically. I think that's right. Because if you only have 4 bars, it gets pretty repetitive pretty fast. And so I'm still just using mostly the same notes that I came up with here, so that's why it's just very important to get your framework for the basically scale that you're going to be working in, and because that's what allowed me to create a second pattern for more variety, as well as get these 2 melodies. I made these melodies based on the notes that I had in here in this framework channel. Yeah, so I left these notes the same. This is the same as we saw in the other part. And here, like you don't need tons of variation, honestly. You really don't. And generally, the more variation you have in terms of jumping around on the keyboard, the busier it becomes, the harder for the listener to really know what's going on it becomes. And it actually makes it harder for you as well to make consistent choices if your melody and your notes are not staying very consistent. So it's generally better to actually keep things a little more simple. And so in the spirit of keeping things simple, I just used the same notes here from the end of measure 1 into the beginning of measure 2, but for some variety I used the notes on the downbeat like I did at the beginning of measure 1. So instead of putting them on the offbeat, now they're right here on the downbeat, and so these notes are actually touching. And so we're still getting a bit of variation. And I also just added 1 note, but you see that the note is just the root note, and that root note has carried through all the way from here. So we literally started at D, just went down to C sharp, and from there we've built some chords. We have a rhythm pattern that we can extrapolate across many measures, and basically for the end of measure 2, obviously you can't just let these notes run out to the end, because it feels like there's not a resolution, it's called in music theory. And so I don't even know if this counts as a resolution, but I'm basically still the same notes, just C sharp, E, and G sharp, and then I'm actually still using them again here. I think these are quarter notes, or maybe eighth notes. I don't know, but they're shorter than these ones, and same with this one. So you can still add variety through your note length, and you can add variety on where you put it versus on the downbeat, on the offbeat, or somewhere in between, like with a triplet or something. And so we still have the same notes, just changed up the rhythm a little bit. And then here we kept the E that has carried throughout, but now we're actually dropping down to C and A, and that's going to create a little bit of tension because your ear has been used to the C sharp, but we are keeping the E the same, and A is actually this note up here. It's just been brought down an octave, and so it's preparing for the loop to jump back up to A. And so even though I'm not even sure if this is like correct musically, but it sounded nice to me and created some tension, but it's not so different that when the loop restarts that you feel like, whoa, I just got taken on a huge tangent. So all of this is to say that you can get a lot of variety without really having to change notes or jump all around the keyboard that much. Okay, so you remember how I called this Dembo house? Well, now I'm going to explain why. So you know how they have like those reggaeton kind of like Latin club beats at like the boom, kaboom, 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 kaboom. So that's actually like really easy to emulate. You basically just have a gap of 2 drum slots between a kind of like a snare or like a tom, and so it basically comes right before the clap. The kick is on the gray and the clap is on the red. So if you follow the red down, you can see that it comes right before. So that's how you get the boom, kaboom, 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 kaboom. So it's coming right before the clap. And then the other one is actually where your hi-hat would be on the offbeat. And that's why it's nice when you have piano and stuff coming in on the offbeat, because you basically get the clap and the hi-hat and the piano kind of all playing with each other rhythmically, and generally you just want to clear as much space as possible for when the kicks come in, because things are going to start competing in terms of like the EQ and all the frequencies, and you're basically not going to be able to hear your kick anymore. And there's more stuff I'll get into in later tutorials, but things like time shift and obviously EQ, where you can start to hear the kick again. But basically, because we've added these snares, one right before the clap and then one where the hi-hat would be, you can kind of get that dembo sound, it's called. so there you saw me use the double solo trick, solo out of instrument and then click solo again, and it brings everything in like a drop. And you should have also heard two new instruments. The first was a trumpet, and surprise, surprise, the notes are the same notes from that framework channel with the piano. And so I literally just shortened the notes and just started clicking stuff wherever these grayed out sections are. So I just started, and honestly, less is more. Like I kept thinking this gap was too big, and just having the D down here versus kind of like rolling up again would sound better. And it just kind of started interfering with the other drums, and so I actually had to take it back and just leave it at D. So honestly, like, simplicity is really your friend here. And because you can see, like, for the first measure we have 7 notes, and they're not chords, they're just individual notes, but it sounds like really playful and really bouncy in my opinion. And we have a good mix of notes. Some are on the downbeat, some are on the offbeat, and so it's just a really nice mixture of a tone and rhythm. And you'll see that even most of these notes are just the same size, like the same length, so I'm not even really playing with note size too much, except right at the very end to get some sort of resolution, especially after we stretch out these notes. Like this is more than 4, it's actually 5, so kind of pushing it with keeping this so similar, and so that's why here I tried to really change it up. And again, we went down to the A, because that's where we did in the bass line, I think. And even though we didn't use it, that A is the one that would have been right here, and it actually is right here. So we do hear an A in the trumpet, and so dropping down to it here, it doesn't sound so jarring. And we also do even drop to an A sharp right here, which I don't even think that's in the scale. Like, technically that's not a valid move, but it's so short, and it gives the trumpet this kind of rolling sound, so I left it. So that's just to say that it doesn't always have to be in the scale. At a certain point, you just have to go with what sounds right. And the same applies where you could be in these grayed out sections, and sometimes it just won't sound right, and if it doesn't sound right, don't do it, because sometimes things could be musically correct, but your ear is generally the best judge, so just trust yourself. Okay, so we're almost done. Just 1 second, I scroll down here. Okay, so yeah, I'm pretty sure I just copy and pasted, like took what I had for the trumpet and brought it here into the Cerebra saw. This is like one of my favorite instruments. I've been doing FL Studio for a long time, and the Cerebra saw has just always stuck with me. And this is in Citrus, which I think is just free, like included with the demo version of FL Studio. So it's a pretty powerful instrument, and it just has like a lot of resonance and harmonics down here in the lower notes, and just so much bass. So you have to use it sparingly, because it gets a little crunchy and stuff like that. But we basically took what we had from the trumpet, and the trumpet is also a Citrus instrument as well, so you can really get like a pretty good sound for just free plugins. And took what we had in the trumpet, copy and pasted it into Cerebra saw. And a really like cheap hack basically is you can just copy and paste what you have in the Cerebra saw and then paste it again in the Cerebra saw, and I just did it on the octave, so you get those lower resonance harmonics as well as more up here in the kind of mids and highs, and it gives the bass a very full sound. And I mean, I didn't really actually do any work here. I just copy and pasted from the trumpet and then copy and pasted down the octave again, and then just called it done. And so yeah, here you can see the bass line. Um, I'm not totally happy with this bass line, honestly, but I kind of did things out of order, and I actually kind of ended up painting myself into a corner. So it was sounding really, really basic, and I think it's because I dropped the BPMs. Usually I'm at 128, and so just having the offbeat is a little more forgiving. But because 125 is slower, it kind of expects more like musically from you, and I just could not deliver. So the bass line was sounding a little basic to me, but you can see how I'm trying to get some variation, and you can click this magnet tool, and if you click none on the magnet, it's like the first drop down right here, then you can basically like click this note and slide it however far you want, and it won't just like snap to these lines. And so that's how you get very like real sounding instruments. And so here you can see I've slid it to be just a little bit of a gap, like just off the end of the measure, and just a little gap. And so those gaps will actually make the bass like re-pluck itself, as opposed to sounding more like a sustained note. So instead of like dun, it'll be like duh duh. So it gets that pluck sound back whenever you have this tiny gap. So it's just all these little changes. And again, the notes are just the root notes of the chords. And so I think I actually followed the trumpet here, making it drop back down to A. And yeah, I mean, this has very little variation, but it's musically correct, and it sounds okay enough to where I just left it. Yeah, so now you can hear everything working together, and we just basically started off with the boots and cats pattern and a D and a C sharp on a piano, and from there you just keep building it, pushing it, and now I would say we have a relatively interesting and dynamic song. And I mean, I just whipped this up in like an hour or something, so I mean, obviously you could put way more time and really flesh it out. And I mean, this is still just a loop, like it's just in the pattern editor. And so if you click this button and go to your song, it takes you to this window back here. And so you can right click pattern 1, right click it, go like to right here, and it'll say split by channel. And once you split by channel, these all each become their own individual patterns. But there's a catch to that, because once you split it, you can't hear everything working in unison. And so once you split it, you have to start pasting stuff into the song. And so that's why I'm not always so eager to just split it out. And I try to stay in the pattern editor for a good amount of time, because you also can't use the solo trick like I'm about to use right now, because it's just going to be that track. So if you solo it, there's going to be no difference. So yeah, I think I'm just about to solo and just let you hear each of the tracks on their own. And so it'll be cool to just know in the back of your head that it just started off as a D and a C sharp, and then we built chords from there, and then we added a bass line and then an actual melody in the form of a trumpet and a cerebra saw. So it really just is just building off of basics. guys, it's Dutta. If you made it this far, I would just ask that you consider subscribing and leaving a thumbs up. And I'm definitely open to your feedback in terms of the pacing of the video. I know the audio wasn't great. I'm still figuring all that stuff out. And if you can see the background image, just know that there's going to be more tutorials than FL Studio. A lot of Blender and even like Unity for game design. So stay tuned. Have a good one.